how to do something big. Everybody wants to do something big in their life, you know, be a millionaire, entrepreneur, whatever it might be. And I was, pretty nice night. Look at that outside. Pretty crazy looking. That's not pollution, I don't think, from LA. Just looks cool. I was just reading this book. This is, some people consider it the best business book you can ever read. That's what Wall Street Journal calls it. It's called Getting More. It's by this Wharton professor. He teaches a class at Wharton Business School. That's the most sold out class in history of the university. And he has this one little chapter. He goes, you know, why did he call this wanting more? He says, that's one of the instinctive human desires, isn't it? More. Whenever you do, whatever you do, don't you wonder if there's more? Doesn't have to mean more for you and less for someone else. It just has to be more. And it doesn't necessarily mean more money. It means more of whatever you value. More money, more time, more food, more love, more travel, more responsibility, more basketball, more TV, more music. And I just was thinking about, I mean, what I'm talking about now isn't necessarily about this book, but that's it. It's like there's something intrinsically built into us, this instinct. And I'm sure you've had it. I'm sure you had a cool idea before and you saw someone else actually do it. That's one of the most painful things that can ever happen to you in life, that missed opportunity where you see, it's like Netflix. I have to wonder how many people thought of the idea of just shipping DVDs in the mail instead of having stores like Blockbuster. Blockbuster ended up bankrupt, and Reed Hastings started Netflix, and now is, you know, built one of the coolest companies in the world. I was just watching a documentary on my phone on Netflix. 30%, at peak hours, 30% of the entire internet in the United States is running through Netflix. And so he took an idea and got more and more and more in a good way, in a way that benefits society, created something, a cool idea and innovation. And so, you know, today I thought I would talk about this subject for a second, whether it's you being a millionaire entrepreneur or you wanting more just quality of life. Like, what does it take to do big things? And so I think the first thing, I've talked about this before, it's like start with the principle of inversion. And Warren Buffett, the second richest man in the world, was speaking at a college. I saw this on a YouTube video. And he brought this up. He was saying, let's say you're trying to figure out how to do more, do something bigger, something cooler, something better for society, better for your bank account. He says, imagine you could bet, imagine you're back in high school. You can bet on any student there, and whoever you bet on, you'll get 10% as a bonus of their income each year. So if they make 50 grand, you'll get 5 grand a year. If they make $1 million, you'll get 100 grand a year, okay? He said, who would you bet on? Would you bet on the quarterback of the football team? Would you bet on the best looking person, the most popular person? He said, no. You would probably look for a set of intangibles. And then he said to take this exercise one step further, and of course Warren Buffett used this to become more than a millionaire investor. He used it to become a billionaire investor. He said, well, who would you bet against? And that's the principle of inversion. Flip it around. To know how to do something big, what guarantees that you will never do anything big? And Charlie Munger, who's the business partner of Warren Buffett, was asked that question. And he said 2 things: sloth and unreliability. He said, guarantee you want to guarantee yourself you will never do anything big with your life. Be lazy and be unreliable. Somebody who sometimes does stuff and then flakes. He's like, those are, in his experience, those guys' experience. So I think the first thing is always invert. Like, think about, what would I bet against turning into something big? And then make sure you never do those things. That's such, it's like a reversal of the golden rule. It's such a good concept that when I tell people it, they forget it. That's how most people are in the world. It's like people want some super complex mathematical E equals MC squared. I'm like, no, that's pretty good right there. Then number 2 goes along with this. be whoever you would bet on. So you know who I would bet on? Going back to high school or junior high or whatever. I didn't go to college. I dropped out of college. But who would I bet on becoming a millionaire entrepreneur and somebody who's going to do big things? Easy. I would bet on somebody who had what I call deep domain expertise and clarity. So let me explain what I mean. So like, let's say you're older and you bump into somebody from junior high or high school. And you remember that kid from junior high and high school. And that was the kid who now, let's say they're trying to start a restaurant chain. So they come to you and they say, hey, I'm raising investment. Do you want to invest in me? Now, if I think back, and I was like, I knew that kid when he was 12 years old. And you know what he would do when all of us would, in the summer, go to camp and play basketball? He'd go work at his dad's restaurant. Or he was the one always, you know, in the kitchen at school working with the cafeteria people or whatever. And I was like, that kid always was focused on one simple thing. And he had always was like, knew a lot about food. That's who I'd bet on. I wouldn't care what he looked like. I wouldn't care male, female, black, white. I'd be like, give me the kid who had clarity on what they were doing young and pretty much, you know, just deep domain expertise. Learned about making sushi, learned about, you know, sourcing food, learned how to work on industrial stoves. The younger, the better. Now, if you're watching this and you're not that young anymore, the principle still applies. I'm not going to be delusional here. It still applies. But obviously, if you didn't start at 12, good news is most people, we live in a society where the educational system tells us that you got to wait for some reason until you're in your 20s to do big things, which, by the way, is a big myth. But if you're 50 and you're watching this, it's the same thing. You then reverse it again, another set of inversion, and you go, okay, I'd bet on somebody who had clarity and deep domain expertise, so then you become that person. You can't do big things without some level of clarity and deep domain expertise. Like Steven Spielberg was making movies at 7, he says. I went to a little thing with him, got to meet him. You know, the king of Hollywood, 7 years old, you would have found him at his home, pretty much high sense of clarity, like I want to do this, and not just clarity, but deep domain expertise. He was playing with different lenses. So you have to be that person, because I sure as hell would bet on Steven Spielberg, and that would be a good bet. Now, again, you can start on that at any age. The younger, the better. So the third thing here to do big things, I'll read you something. If you don't, where's my phone here? Let's put this on my Twitter and my Snapchat. If you don't follow, it's under Ty Lopez 1. And this is what Arthur Schopenhauer. So Arthur Schopenhauer is one of the greatest philosophers of all time. And I posted this, a day or two ago. He said, everyone takes the limits of their own vision for the limits of the world. Okay? So what you have to do is, I would question my self-imposed limits. So let's talk about this, because this can sound very cliche, but Schopenhauer was not a cliche philosopher. He was a complicated man. And you know, this book that if you've seen some of my other YouTube videos and podcast stuff, Hatching Twitter, this is a story of Twitter by Nick Bilton. So Nick Bilton was in here the other day. He's kind of the guy that knows more about the real story of Twitter than anybody. Wrote a New York Times best-selling book on Twitter, and he says, you know, I asked him point blank, I was like, Jack Dorsey, Ed Williams, these guys that built an $18 billion company from scratch, how'd they do it? What was the thing you learned from being around them? And he said, what I learned is these guys had very broad vision. He's like, they were hungry. Like, they weren't the guys going, Jack Ma is another person like this. Jack Ma started, I think he's the richest man in China now. He was making 80 cents a day, a dime an hour. And now, you know, he's worth whatever, 10, 20 billion dollars. And the thing, Alipay, he owns these different, Alibaba. And when I think it was eBay or no, it was Yahoo came to China and they wanted to buy Jack Ma's company, he had such broad vision where most people would have taken the deal. He said, he thought bigger. He said, no, I'm going to buy you. That's what he did. He bought, and he owns Yahoo China. So Jack Dorsey, same thing. These guys at Twitter, they thought big. And so what happens, and there's various reasons. There's good science. Can you grab me that book right there, that sociology red book? What happens if you're not careful? Yeah, that one, this one. So this is a book I keep around. It's a very famous technical book. It's by Dan Gilbert and Fisk. It's Handbook of Social Psychology. This is volume 2. I don't know where no, this is volume 1. Oh, I have volume 2 here. So it's this complicated book on, convergences and using the self to understand reflected self-appraisals. And one of the concepts that's in these type of books is something called social controls. So in some places, like in Sweden and Norway, they have this phrase called jantelagen. I lived there for a little while. And jantelagen is basically never think too highly of yourself. If you try to stand out, they'll push you back down. That's what jantelagen somewhat means. There's a similar saying in Japan, the nail that stands out gets pounded down again. And so as you've grown up, you and I, this world view